Maxine Waters was on the House floor talking about supporting the bills that would support a lot of the people we're talking about. Here's a clip of her yesterday.
I not only rise in support of this legislation, the Enhancement Act, I also would like to rise in support of what we're doing for the Healthcare Enhancement Act in this bill. And I'm going to take a moment to dedicate this legislation to my dear sister who is dying in a hospital in St. Louis, Missouri right now, infected by the coronavirus.
That was Representative Maxine Waters on the House floor yesterday, as I said, just before a House vote on the new package that we've been talking about, new financial package, talking about our sister who's dying of coronavirus in a hospital in St. Louis, Missouri. We're on Facebook and Twitter with our post show, continuing our discussion about COVID-19, unemployment, and the financial strain in communities of color. And I think that Representative Waters' statement on the floor, in conjunction with the conversation we're having, makes it clear what the reality is and how we got here, that COVID-19 is very real, and it's killing a lot of people, and it's killing a lot of people of color, and we need to understand what that is in addition to the impact on our communities. So I thought, you know, that was a moment on the floor. I know you were there. You saw it, Congresswoman Presley. That was quite something. Anyway, I wanted to continue our conversation. Go ahead.
No, Kelly, I appreciate your saying that, because it's important that as we're seeing all these numbers and these reports every day, you know, that we don't numb ourselves and get desensitized. You know, given the comorbidities of structural racism and unequal access to our healthcare system, you know, we've been slowly dying, Black and brown folks, for a long time. It's now just happening much more bluntly. Yeah. And so it's not metaphorical to say that this is a matter of life and death. It is literal. Yeah. And so we can never become desensitized to that. Yeah.
William Watkins, after the last recession, you know, what I've learned since we've been looking at COVID-19 and its impact on communities of color, and in this conversation on workers of color, the Great Recession hit us harder, and also the last recession. And it took years for folks to recover. In fact, I'm not sure lots of people had recovered when now this happens on top of it. So understanding that, what are the lessons from the slow recovery, as it were, that the Urban League took away in terms of trying to prepare to come out of this and be ready to actually survive in this moment? And when we finally are back to something that looks like normal, how do we continue to survive?
Well, I'm going to tell the truth. We are not prepared for what is to happen when the dust settles, because true numbers are not coming out about how many people are truly unemployed. Because matter of fact, before this even happened, there were a ton of people that came off the unemployment rolls that gave Donald Trump the means to say, oh, we have the lowest unemployment rate since mankind, but that wasn't true. It was more Black and brown people who are chronically unemployed, but they just could not be counted any longer. So we have that. On top of the fact, we have all the brilliant colleges and universities here in Massachusetts. Guess what? They're going to have difficulty getting a job. 39% of the jobs held by Blacks are vulnerable to permanent layoffs, to a reduction in pay, furloughs. There's so much that's about to happen when the dust settles. Not just the Urban League, but all of the community. We have to think about, how do we restructure our economy? How do we restructure our workforce? One of the things that we know out of this COVID is that we need to bring a lot of those jobs back to America. And what Massachusetts is also knowing too is that we can't just go out and get PPEs anywhere in the world. We need to start looking at some of these areas that was decimated by manufacturing of years gone by, and start to revamp and retool these manufacturing buildings and make our own PPEs right here in the state. So there's quite a few things that we are going to be hurt by for a long time. What I'm really looking at right now is we talked about it, the last one in, first one out. That talks to our diversity and inclusion programs.
Yes.
That hits directly at that, because those last ones just in that came through these diversity and inclusion programs, we called it affirmative action once before. We wanted to give it a nice name. Diversity and inclusion programs, it's going to be those individuals that are going to be a part of that 39%. That's going to be just left out in the cold. We're going to look at companies who says, wow, there's a lot of great talent out here, and they're going to change their job descriptions to say, I need 5 and 10 years of experience.
So what are some ideas you can give people about how to cope in this moment and try to do the best they can to move forward?
I think what is happening, I see a lot of great companies out there as well who are offering free online, a lot of the colleges are offering free online training. And I think this is that time I talk about. This is the time to reset. This is also the time to retool, recharge, reorganize. This is that time for you to go and get some of those free trainings, some of those certifications. I wish we were like Canada and got $2,000 a month for the next 4 months, and I probably could put a little change off to the side and take some of these trainings as well. Mm-hmm. We have to I know you are. You a fighter down there.
I'm working on it.
I know there are a lot of things that needs to happen in this time of resetting. When we talk about fair lending, we have the same individual, the same person that's handling fair lending. It's not going to be any different.
Okay. All right, Desiree,
Kelly,
this is in your arena. What do you say?
Oh, I absolutely wholeheartedly agree. I think, it's almost a little bit of a catch-22, right? Because we need to rethink about kind of the strategies that are at play in the Black community and the minority community at large as to our opportunities, job opportunities, education opportunities. At the same time, those are the same ones that are going to be struggling, right? Because colleges are closed and folks are wondering what's going to happen in the fall. So the question of whether or not it makes sense to go to college is still out there. But I do think it is a time, as Mr. Watkins, very eloquently said, to reset and retool. And I think we have to get creative about what that means. I think, it's not going to be as easy as picking one of the two roads. I'm going to go to college or I'm going to go to the trades. I think we're going to need to really evaluate how to bring those two together in a creative fashion. And it's going to be hard because we've already talked about our communities are the most behind in those same areas that we're going to need to develop ourselves in. So not only are we going to have to play catch up, but we're going to have to bring it forward to another level in order for this not to be our story 20, 30 years down the line when, we have another resurgence of whatever the case may be at that point.
Kelly, if I may?
Yes, please.
I have a couple of suggestions for people. You were asking, Kelly, what can people be doing at this time? And I think that's a really important point. I think all workers need to be making themselves indispensable, whatever that means for your particular position. Make yourself indispensable, because that's going to go a long way in making sure that you do not get axed out first. It's so easy for people of color in the workplace to be isolated, to be passed over often. And then that also means in crisis moments like this, that we're the first one on the list being told that we are dispensable. And so working to invert that, to make yourself indispensable, is critical. And the second thing is, if you are a small business, think about how you can strategically invest at this time to be able to not just survive and sustain, but use this as an opportunity for growth. And Lawyers for Civil Rights, we just brought in a new attorney who's going to be helping us deal with coronavirus issues. So looking at this as an opportunity for growth is I think important, as challenging as that might be. And the third piece of advice that I would give to workers and small business owners is know your rights. Get yourself legal support. And if you can't afford it, come to lawyers for civil rights, whether you're a small business owner or a worker, because that type of legal know your rights approach is going to help level the playing field, and it's going to give you an advantage. And so those are just some practical tips that I want to offer for folks who are struggling in this time.
How do you start from, it's been out here for a while, and they use generically, so I assume this means someone white, that most Americans don't have $400 for an emergency. So assuming that hits harder in communities of color who would have less, how do you start from there at a moment of crisis like this when people are waiting to get their stimulus checks? Those haven't come. Yvonne, you talked about having to just even get some of the unemployment insurance application process in Spanish so everybody could apply. I mean, there's a lot going on that's delayed even the access to the funds and support that is due people in this moment. So I'm trying to figure out, how do you just try to reset when you have very little to do that with? Does anybody have a suggestion? I'll take it.
Yeah,
I'll just be quick.
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead, Congresswoman Presley, you want to say?
Again, the Trump administration has failed and continues to fail to meet the scale and scope of this unprecedented hurt. I am buoyed by what we see happening in the Commonwealth and in our municipalities. We have to be coordinated in this. Like, it can't just be Black and brown folks saying our businesses need technical support, and you have to make this a priority. There is no economy, there is no small business economy without our businesses. And we have to be unapologetic, not only in our elevating that, but in getting others to do that. I think what we need to focus on is the broadband piece, because it's the only way that folks can be in virtual community, access resources. That is the portal by which we're organizing and doing everything, because I've seen this sort of principle of Ubuntu being practiced, right? Like as if we're all in a cooperative. People are, to your point about and making yourself indispensable, right? That people are lending whatever their gifts are to this moment, like a true cooperative. That's the reset we need to get to. We need to change the fact that the median wealth for a Black household is $8 in Boston. We need to change the fact that the Black dollar only stays in our community for 6 hours. You want to know what you can do? I know people have very little disposable income, but whatever you have, support your neighbor that's making PPE. Buy a gift card online for one of our independent bookstores or a restaurant. Do 1 day of takeout if you can. And then I need everyone to complete the census. That is really, really important, because our communities have been under-resourced for a very long time, because we are one of the most undercounted. In the 100 largest cities in the country, Boston is 9th in being hardest to count. And that's not even layering on top of that the xenophobia and the real fear that our undocumented immigrant neighbors feel that would make them less inclined to complete a census. But that's funds for public education, community development block grants, more affordable housing, language access, Social Security, Medicare. So complete your census, operate with the spirit of a cooperative, and then I'm going to fight for the broadband, okay? Our fourth stimulus bill will be an infrastructure bill. I am fighting for us to more holistically define infrastructure to include housing. That's your most expensive bill at all. But also for water infrastructure, for broadband. And then the other thing is, Callie, to the point that I raised previously about our not having a minority business development agency, and the first CARES Act allocated $10 million to those agencies to make sure that things were being equitably accessed. I'm working with Chairwoman Waters, because I serve on financial services, to work with our appropriators to get that for Massachusetts. And then our minority businesses, they don't need loans, they need grants. So that's what I'm going to be fighting for, is grants.
I will note that there's somewhere in the Midwest, somebody had an innovative idea with regard to broadband and low-income communities where they retrofit the school buses that are not being used in this moment and drive the buses to make hot spots for those kids who are trying to do their remote learning, which I think is a brilliant idea. So there's probably more innovation of the type that William Watkins was talking about earlier. Desiree, it's really important to understand the difference between layoffs and furloughs in this moment. While Yvonne is talking about making yourself indispensable, if the worst happens, please explain how one operates. Can you get unemployment with one? Can you get with another one? Can you not? What happens?
Yeah, so the difference is basically a furlough is a temporary mandatory leave of absence. So your employer has said, I'm not letting you go. I'm not eliminating your job, but I'm not allowing you to work for a certain period of time. It's a temporary time period that they put in place based on operations concerns. They're, the factors that they've considered and what they can do. Furlough can be either a complete furlough, meaning that you're off for your entire scheduled budgeted hours, or it could be partial, meaning that they've reduced your schedule. You're not coming in as often, or you are doing half days instead of full 8 hours days. Now, traditionally, if you were being furloughed, which is temporary, and you still have a job, technically speaking, though you're not earning money, you weren't eligible for unemployment. That was traditionally how it worked. Now, given the crisis and everything that's going on, at least in Massachusetts, our regulations have been issued last month that allow for employees who are partially furloughed or fully furloughed to apply for unemployment benefits. And so you could have access to those processes, even though you're still technically on an employer's payroll. Termination, separation is completely different. You are being separated from your employer. You do not have a job anymore. Under our state's law, at that point in time, you're entitled to any accrued vacation or paid leave that you've earned at that point as part of your separation. If you are eligible per your employer's policies for severance, that's also something that you could expect at a termination situation. With a furlough, since you're still employed, you wouldn't necessarily get severance. You wouldn't necessarily, you definitely won't be entitled to any payout of any accrued time, because the idea would be that you are coming back. Now, that being said, a furlough can turn into a layoff. For whatever reason, a decision, ultimately has to be, the employer comes to the decision that they can't actually afford to bring people back as they had hoped. That situation would turn into a layoff termination situation. So all those other rules that I explained before in terms of severance and vacation payout, that would apply in that situation.
So Yvonne, just to be clear, if you're furloughed in this situation, those small businesses with furloughed employees can take advantage of the Payroll Protection Act, because that helps them pay for those salaries.
Absolutely. And the idea behind the PPP was actually to make sure that businesses didn't have to furlough, didn't have to go through rounds of layoffs. The unfortunate thing is that because of the delays associated with the PPP, businesses have had to go through furloughs and layoffs, which is crazy, because the whole point was to avoid that scenario. But absolutely, like the Congresswoman said, every small business should be going to get a PPP loan so that they can bring all those payroll employees back into the mix. And now, even if you're self-employed, even if you're a sole proprietor, you can apply for PPP for your own salary and even for unemployment as well. So there are a lot of options, and we encourage people to contact lawyers for civil rights, whether they're business owners or whether they're workers, to make sure that we can provide you with, at your fingertips, everything that you need for that financial assistance that is vital to keep roof over your head or put food on the table.
Great place to leave it. I thank you all for your insight and good ideas, and just stay safe.
You too, Kelly. Bye, everyone.
You too.
Bye,
Be safe.
everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.